Zoning is the regulation of private land use and development by the local government. There are no federal zoning laws. Zoning is an essential part of the master plan. A master plan is a comprehensive plan to guide the long-term physical development of a particular area. Let's be clear here. Zoning increases the marketability of a property. For example, would you want to live next to a gas station? Well, guess what? A gas station would not need to be near you either. So, luckily for both of you, there is zoning. Zoning is a police power. Now, when you think of police power, do not think of the men in blue. The police power is that power that is held by the state to legislate for the purposes of preserving the public health, safety, morals, and general welfare. Zoning for land use is generally divided into residential, commercial, agricultural, industrial, and special purpose properties. When we're talking about special purpose properties, we are talking about properties that are of benefit to the public, such as schools, hospitals, and police stations. Each of these land uses are subdivided into classifications. For example, a multifamily residential unit would be zoned as R3, the R being for residential. Zoning ordinances control a number of things, such as heights of buildings, setback lines, density, floor area ratios, buffers, buffer zones, and variances. Let's go over some of those things in more detail. A setback is the distance from the edge of the road or sidewalk to the structure that was built. It can also be from the center of the road. Check with your local zoning to see where the setback line is for you. Density is usually associated with subdivisions, restricting the number of houses per acre that may be built within that subdivision. A floor area ratio is the ratio of square footage in the land area. The floor area ratio can be used in zoning to limit the amount of construction in a certain area. A buffer is found between two lots, such as a fence, a wall, or even a row of trees. A buffer zone is a space of land between two districts, such as a park, playground, or a highway. Downzoning is a change in the zoning to permit less intensive developments that are currently permitted. A zone going from commercial to residential is an example of downzoning. A variance is an exception that is granted from the zoning rules. A variance is granted when the situation is exceptional, and if granting that variance will not affect the rest of the community. Key thing to remember is a variance is an exception to the rule. An example would be a house built on an oddly shaped lot. If the odd shape of the lot makes it difficult to comply with the setback line set by the zoning standard, a variance could be requested. Variances are granted lot by lot.
Cities around the world are growing rapidly. Up to 1.4 million people per week are moving into urban areas. Much of this urban growth, as much as 90%, is happening in Africa and Asia, where infrastructure, housing, and businesses must be built to support these booming populations. In fact, humanity will build more in the next 20 years than it has ever built in history. 1 billion new dwelling units will be built by 2050. This gives us a unique opportunity to create cities that can solve or be responsive to a number of difficult problems and create safer, more vibrant communities. For instance, the way we build our cities has a profound effect on how vulnerable they are to natural hazards like earthquakes, cyclones, and floods. Over the last few decades, natural disasters have more than quadrupled, both in number and in the size of their impact. Climate change threatens to make this trend even worse. Building codes and land use regulation have proven to be the most effective tools to promote health and safety in cities and reduce disaster risk. However, in many low and middle-income countries, these important regulations don't exist or are not implemented, leaving many buildings vulnerable to fire, collapse, flooding, and more. Major development partners like the World Bank, along with governments, civil society groups, and the private sector, are coming together to change this. The Building Regulation for Resilience Program, a growing global partnership, will help improve implementation and compliance of building regulation in vulnerable countries. With applied science, sound engineering, and the right institutions, we can build well-designed cities and safer buildings that help protect lives and ensure that development gains won't crumble or be washed away by disasters. Together, we can build a safer and more resilient future. Metro Manila, well, it's home to 14 million people, with 4 out of every 10 residents living in slums. The Philippine government is trying to relocate these informal settlers by the year 2016 by building affordable houses and having schemes to help them buy their own homes. Channel News Asia's Christine Ong tells us more.
67-year-old Ana Arbolante moved to Manila from Quezon Province 40 years ago in search for a better life with her husband and 1-year-old daughter. Her husband found a job as a cab driver, but his pay was not enough to pay for the rental of a 15 square meter apartment, which was $150 a month. So they found a spare lot beside this creek and made it home.
Pag naupa ka, pagkagising mo, may utang ka na naman. Hanggat maaari, pilitin na yung iuupa mo, ipakain mo lang sa mga apo mo, ganun.
But a typhoon in 2009 caused the river to overflow, and it flooded their house. That finally convinced Ana to take part in government's relocation plan for informal settlers.
Siyempre, yung panahon ngayon, ulan lagi, nakakatakot na pag malaki yung ilog. Kasi baka malanslide. Marami akong apo. Kaya pinag-iisip na yan, pag ako'y aalis, taga-alala rin ako na pag nandito sila, wala ako, biglang malanslide.
The Philippine government has allocated $1.2 billion to relocate some 8 million informal settlers by 2016. The priority of the government right now is to remove about 100,000 informal settler families living along danger zones like this, especially with the onslaught of the typhoon season. Now, each family will be given about $400 to help them in their new relocation sites. The government scheme also helps families to buy their own homes. By paying $20 a month for 30 years, recipient families will eventually own this 25 square meter house and the lot it occupies. But the reality is that Metro Manila has a sprawling population of 14 million, and 4 in 10 of its residents live in slums. The government has said it cannot solve the problem on its own and has asked for private sector help.
If a family doesn't have a decent place to live, then children don't stay healthy. If they're not healthy, they don't do well in school. If they don't get an education, they don't have the chance to lift themselves up. And so we would say that housing is a prerequisite for families and to be able to lift themselves up.
NGOs like Habitat for Humanity help alleviate the problem by offering home ownership programs similar to the government scheme. And for Justina Oroque, who's been living in a dump site for 30 years, the prospect of having a house to give her children is a dream come true.
Ang respeto po parang nagbago po, hindi kagaya doon sa squatter na parang tingin ng mga tao sa iyo mababa kasi nandoon ka sa squatter, pero pag kagaya ngayon na nalipat na po kami, parang masarap ang pakiramdam po namin sa sarili namin na parang taas na kami nga, hindi kami parang ikakahiya ng mga tao dahil nandito na kami sa lugar na to.
At least 10 housing projects are in progress to accommodate some 6,426 informal settler families in danger areas in Metro Manila. Christine Ong, Channel News Asia, Manila.
Disasters create large humanitarian and development challenges. The frequency and severity of disasters have increased over the last few years, also as a result of climate change. More than 226 million people are affected by disasters every year. More than 680,000 people died in earthquakes between 2000 and 2010, mainly due to poorly constructed buildings. Since 1980, drought and associated famine have claimed nearly 558,000 lives and affected more than 1.6 billion people. Cyclones, hurricanes and typhoons affect 37 million people. It is thus important to keep in mind that disasters are not natural. They only occur when people lack preparedness or the ability to cope with hazards. We can use the following formula. While education systems are greatly affected by disasters, they are also part of the solution. Education on disaster risk reduction can provide life-saving information and skills that protect children and young people during and after disasters. Education has a vital role to play in preparing communities and building disaster-resilient societies and safe lives. Schools should be built to be disaster-proof. In the case of Japan, this saved many children who survived because they were in school. Disaster risk reduction should be introduced into school curricula and programs. This will ensure that learners understand the causes and consequences of disasters and know how to act when a disaster strikes. Learners should also participate, for example, in mapping school hazards, risks and vulnerabilities around them, and in developing school disaster preparation plans. This gives them the opportunity to learn by doing, as well as testing their newly acquired knowledge in practice. The entire learning community should work on safety measures in preparation for a disaster. It is our hope that as many countries will integrate disaster risk reduction into the planning and construction of their facilities.
Workplace emergencies occur without warning, and when they do, preparation can mean the difference between life and death. In any situation requiring an immediate evacuation, such as a fire or explosion, a hazardous material spill, an act of workplace violence, or an emergency situation happening just outside of your facility, it is important to not only have an emergency evacuation plan in place, but to clearly communicate that plan to your employees. This ensures that everyone knows what to do when an emergency happens. The 3 steps that your evacuation plan should include are the pathway to the exit itself, and the exit discharge. We'll refer to them as to, through, and away. Step 1. How do I get to the exit? If the exit itself is not immediately visible, then look for pathway to exit marking or path marking signage that will direct you to your nearest exit. Look for signs, floor markers, arrows, and floor tapes marking exit routes and stairwells. Glow-in-the-dark signage makes your pathways even safer in the event of a power outage or a fire. Path marking not only informs you of which way to go, but which way not to go. Any doors or passageways along a pathway that could be mistaken for an exit are required by OSHA to be marked with a sign saying, "Not an exit," or with a sign that clearly identifies its use. Step 2. Which door must I go through? OSHA requires that all doors which open directly to the outside be equipped with UL 924 listed exit signs, which means simply that the exit sign must be lit. They can be either electrically lit or zero energy photoluminescent requiring no electricity at all. And step 3, how far away from the building should I get? You need to move quickly to your facility's predetermined emergency evacuation area and notify your supervisor right away that you made it out safely. It is very important that you do not leave the premises. If you leave without telling anyone, your coworkers might think that you're still inside the building, and it could result in the injuries or deaths of first responders that would be sent in to rescue you. Remember, to, through, and away. This is your key to getting out safely in a workplace emergency.
And now for our final business issue this week, Filipino professionals will be pleased to know that the Japan International Cooperation Agency, more known as JICA, has announced the call for applicants for its scholarship programs offered by the Japanese government for those who want to study in Japan. Andre Ko, our business reporter, has the details.
JICA has announced that the Project for Human Resource Development Scholarship by Japanese Grant Aid is open for Filipinos engaged in formulating and implementing socio-economic development plans and become future leaders in their respective fields. Mr. Susumu Ito, JICA Chief Representative, said that, quote, by helping build the capacity of Filipino professionals, JICA aims to sustain economic growth trajectory of the Philippines in the long term, unquote. A Filipino professional banker from the Development Bank of the Philippines, Mr. Francis de los Reyes, who obtained his master's in economics from the International University of Japan, added that, quote, the Japanese scholarship is not just about career advancement. It is also about developing the values we need to contribute to Philippine development, unquote. The Japanese Grant Aid, or JDA, is open to Filipinos the ages of 22 and 39 as of April 1, 2018. The applicant must be interested to pursue a master's degree in Japan to support Philippine development. Application is open until November 14, 2017. To date, 319 Filipinos have been recipients of this scholarship in fields like agriculture, human resources, health, public works, policy development, manufacturing, tourism, social welfare, and energy.
Aside from the Japanese grant aids, JICA is also offering training for young leaders and academic researchers. The Philippines is a partner country of JICA. And with that, we end this watch.